And he panicked. He looked at her, thought, couldn't feel her pulse. She's gone. She's dead. And he actually took her body out to the foreshore in a wheelbarrow, had burnt some stuff and essentially buried her at sea. That's his story.
Right.
I mean, it was completely horrendous. Slashed the telephone cord and basically grabbed the baby, ran to the carport. Absolutely terrifying.
I'm Andrew Rule. This is Life and Crimes. Today we welcome back to the studio at South Bank an old friend of ours. Not that she's old, but she's been a friend for a while, and that is Emily Webb, one of the better crime writers around town, and been at it now quite a while. I used to think of her as sort of a young girl, learning the craft, but now, of course, she's a veteran. And I'm, in fact, like Moses. I'm Methuselah. Emily's just written yet another book. This one is called Murder in the Suburbs, and it seems to me that it covers stories from all around Australia and perhaps the odd one from overseas. But because we're sitting in Melbourne, we'll probably open, Emily, with talking about something from Greater Melbourne, maybe even Frankston. Would that be right? And welcome to Life and Crimes. Welcome back.
Thank you, because I listen to Life and Crimes every week. It is one of my all-time favourite podcasts, so I am honoured.
Beautiful. Now, you've been just telling us off mic all the work you've been doing. A lot of the work you've been doing is getting this book done. There's a lot of stories in it. How many?
Oh, there's about 15, 18.
And inside some of those are multiple stories. Inside some of the long chapters are more than one story.
Yeah.
And we're going to delve into one of those in a minute. But the Frankston vanishing case, what is that? It's something I'm not familiar with, and I'm really curious.
Well, I came across it. I'd never heard of it before, and I know you know pretty much all the crimes that have ever happened, but I always feel
that's not true.
Really thrilled when I find something I don't know about. So this happened in 1950 and in Frankston.
How old do you think I am? I was not born then.
No, I know you wouldn't, but I thought you might have come across it in your, research.
I have not. So delighted to hear about it, because I'll steal it.
Absolutely. Hey, we help each other out. So this happened in 1950 in Frankston, and a woman in her 50s disappeared. Her name was Caroline Scully. She lived in a house that was right in the main guts of Frankston, where the street actually, there's a shopping centre there now. But Frankston was not the Frankston we know back then. It was like,
Bayside holiday.
Yeah. But she was like a mother and grandmother, had 4 adult children. Her husband, Edward Scully, had been in the Navy for many years. They were both actually from the UK and came out to Australia in the late 1910s, early 1920s, and were married and had their family. And Edward had recently left the Navy. He was a cook. He started as a cook. And, Caroline just went missing. And there was a bit about the situation, though. So Edward and Caroline had been living apart. I mean, he was away a lot when he was in the Navy, but...
Was it a case of in the Navy?
Yes,
it was
exactly.
A bit of that?
Definitely. I think it was a bit of that. Mm. And they're married, but they're not living together.
Frankston was a village. They were village people.
Well, that's it. And they were well known around the village. And Caroline lived in the house that they had purchased, but Edward was he was in a relationship with someone else, shall I say, a younger woman he'd met working as a cook at like a holiday camp I can't remember the name of it. It was an old migrant camp, that had then been sold to a group who wanted to make it into almost like an Australian Butlins, like those, like hidey-hi campers, that kind of thing. And that went on for a few years, but then I believe the government bought that land back and it's now a defence base down on the peninsula somewhere.
Oh, yeah. That's fine,
Yeah. So he had met a younger woman in her 30s, a waitress called Jean Baker.
Yeah.
And look, he was in a relationship. People kind of knew. But there was some attempts to reconcile. So Edward came back and was like, Caroline, let's sell the house and make a fresh start. So they'd actually sold the house in Frankston and they were going to buy a business and maybe move to the country somewhere, Bendigo, Ballarat, somewhere like that. But Caroline sort of just disappears. She doesn't turn up for work one day. She actually worked for a really well-known bookmaker who you might know of called Len Jewson.
I've heard of that name.
It was a pretty prominent bookie.
Yep.
She was a housekeeper a few days a week for Len and his wife Alma, who lived in a very beautiful home in Frankston that's heritage listed. But she didn't turn up to work when she was expected, and it's believed Edward had rung up Alma Jewson and said, "Oh, Caroline won't be in. We're packing for a trip," or something like that, or the house move. The thing is, no one hears from Caroline. She didn't turn up for some things she was meant to. And the kids are like, "Well, where's Mum? What's going on?" The kids are adults.
Yep.
Some of them have children. One of the daughters is expecting a baby very soon.
So potential grandma's not about to just bolt on that scenario.
No. And Caroline and her daughters were particularly close and spoke a lot. I think a few of the kids lived locally. One of the sons was in the Navy as well. And what happened was Edward told people a few weeks later that Caroline had left a note that she'd gone on the Spirit, which was a train that went to Albury, I think, and then you could move to Sydney.
Yep.
He said he came back one night and found this note, "Gone on the Spirit."
Yeah.
Okay, that's strange. And he was just very evasive about what had happened, and the kids were like, "What's going on? Where's Mum?" One of the daughters had checked the house and said, "Well, Mum never travels without this crocheted blanket," which is still there. You know, her possessions were there, but things like she knew that her mum, if she travelled, and they had lived in other parts of Australia, so it wasn't beyond the realm that maybe she might have gone somewhere, but not when she was about to be a new grandma again.
Yes, exactly.
So, they almost had to press gang their dad, actually, to go to the police and report Caroline missing. And this was almost a month after she'd gone. Caroline hadn't collected the money from the house sale. It just was all a bit weird. So the police got involved. The homicide squad got involved pretty quickly, but there was a very big search, like across Frankston, obviously foot police, talking to witnesses, looking at, there was some pine groves back then. I don't believe they're there now in Frankston. There was like pine plantations back there, probably where the pines are, the housing and stuff was, just looking for it. And from what I was reading in the newspapers and other things, like, because there was quite a few articles, pleas for, have you seen this woman, went all around Australia, but they were on the back foot because really the last time she'd been seen was at the end of May in 1950, and police weren't alerted till sort of early June, a couple of weeks into June, and it was a big search Australia-wide. But
so the police took it pretty seriously.
They certainly did. They dug up the garage at the house. They
clearly were looking for a body.
Yeah. They were saying, "Oh, she's missing," but I think they believe she was dead. Edward would say, "Well, she could be in the Blue Mountains in Katoomba because we lived there once when we were married, or maybe she's in Queensland, or maybe she's in Tasmania." Just so evasive. And meanwhile, it was a big media story, and papers like The Truth, like, great, look, I love The Truth, issues of The Truth, salacious crime reporting, but usually pretty good crime reporting. Yeah. But he was back with the girlfriend, Jean Baker. He had given some of Caroline's jewellery to Jean.
Oh.
And they'd actually at one point were working together at the Black Stump Hotel out in the Yarra Valley in Narberthon.
Oh, yeah.
And would sign in as Mr. and Mrs. Scully. So it's looking pretty dodgy, really. And witnesses would say that they knew that the marriage was a bit rocky. The lawyer who did the house sale said, well, they said they were going to have a new start, but Caroline didn't seem too happy. So there was a really massive search all over, but nothing came up.
Yeah, just fell off a cliff. And what led you back to look at it again and bring it up?
I just found it I don't really have a great plan when I'm writing. I'm not a very well-planned writer. I just research, read, the rabbit holes we go down. And I just noticed it and I thought, wow, I don't know about that. This is really interesting. I do find missing persons cases really fascinating. And I think what drew me in was, as this evolved, I mean, Edward Scully was arrested for and charged with the murder of Caroline.
Yeah.
And it was to be the first case in Victoria for someone to be charged with, homicide without a body. And we know that that has happened.
Yes. Hard to prove, but it can happen.
Yeah, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. But also the scale of the search. They eventually, went and arrested him in Queensland. He was living with his girlfriend Jean, and
he ended up there.
Yeah, he moved up there. He lived up there with Jean for a bit of a fresh start. The thought is that he kind of forced the house sale under the guise of let's make a fresh start,
and then
Caroline, so he could get the cash,
Yeah.
To make this start with sort of hapless Jean Baker, who was splashed all over the newspapers
poor
a
Jean.
bit. I don't know, seemed a bit of a silly younger woman, but, hey, we've all been silly in love before.
Yes, it happens all the time.
Hopefully not to that extent, know. But he was arrested in Queensland. And
what was he like? Any idea? Were there photographs in the Truth?
Yes, he seemed quite a tall man, dark hair.
Can't trust them, tall blokes. Yeah.
He was younger than Caroline, so he was probably in his early 50s. Caroline was about 56 or 57. And, the way papers describe women and the clothes they wore, she had like brown hair that was pulled back and last seen wearing a gabardine suit. And, in the photo, she does look a bit older than him. She had a very established life in Frankston. She had that job with the bookmaker and his wife doing the cleaning. She had friends that she caught up with regularly and she was very close to her kids. But the homicide squad back then were like, she's dead, but where is she?
Any idea of what happened to the family? Any of those kids, are they out there somewhere?
I actually got in some contact through Ancestry.com, very handy, with like the wife of the son of one of the kids. It was a bit convoluted, but she does remember, she said we weren't able to catch up. The people were sort of scattered around and, the stars didn't align. But I did make some contact, but they seem to have very scant knowledge about things, and I'll send a book to them. She did mention that Auntie Bet was one of the children of Caroline Edward, that her husband had always said, Auntie Bet always thought her mother would never go away, like never leave. It was just weird. Now, look, it's a bit of a spoiler alert, but look, Caroline's body was never found, but Edward did make a confession of sorts. I mean, the issue is, though, you've only got one voice, like Caroline's voice can't be heard. So he actually told his son when he was in the watch house in Brisbane that they'd been having an argument in the kitchen of the Ritchie Street Frankston home that they just sold, and Caroline had suddenly fainted and hit her head on the stove in the kitchen. Yeah. And he panicked. He looked at her, thought, couldn't feel a pulse. She's gone. She's dead. And he actually took her body out to the foreshore in a wheelbarrow, had burnt some stuff and essentially buried her at sea. That's his story, which probably did bury her at sea, but whether or not she fainted, the doctor gave evidence, Caroline's family doctor gave evidence that, back then they seemed to have inquests really quickly. Did you notice that? They really quickly. Yeah. And then there
was no backlog.
Yeah, no, it was like weeks after. And
it wasn't clogged by legal process and lawyers and scientific stuff. They just banged it on.
And they had all the witnesses,
It was a clerical exercise.
Yeah, and you can get quite a lot of information from that. But the family GP gave evidence. I'd never known Caroline to have fainted before. So
these sort of crimes are as old as time, aren't they? We see versions of them every, there's been that big one in Queensland and other places where usually husband kills wife, sometimes the other way around, usually because of a third party.
Yeah, and who knows what the argument was about. Probably, understandably, Caroline was probably frustrated because he's, off with, the younger woman. Or
nearly always money and sex.
Yeah, and reading between the lines of all the information, I think Caroline was probably reluctant to sell the Frankston home. Yeah. That is what it sounded like. Yeah. But look, he pled to lesser charges of, I think the charge was interfering with the coroner's ability to,
So what sort of time did he get?
He did about 3 years, not too long, no. And then he ended up actually back up in Queensland, married to Jean Baker.
This underlines a theory I've got that sentences have not got laxer, they've gone the other way. When you go back in time, you think, that's amazing. You'd get 3 times that now.
Yeah.
It is amazing.
Well, especially with some of the episodes you do, where I was listening to one about like completely heinous murders of young women, and the 2 guys kind of got out pretty quickly.
Nolte, Rosalind
Yeah,
Nolte,
that's
one
it.
of the worst murders anywhere in the world ever.
Shocking.
Torture murder. They were both out before they were 40. They'd gone in at 19 or 20. They were out at the age of 39.
Yeah,
and should have had the key, just never to be released.
Because you'd never be released now.
Well, it shouldn't be.
I thought you'd find interesting, though, as well, is the homicide squad at the time.
Yeah.
There's probably some names you know. There was a guy called Frank Bluey Adams.
Yes, he was famous.
And then when I was, like researching, I thought, I need to mention this. I'm not saying that the homicide squad did not do their investigation properly, but later on, some of those guys were embroiled in the big abortion inquiry.
Ford and Matthews.
Yeah.
Jack Ford and Jack Matthews. The 2 Jacks.
So they were like getting, kickbacks because doctors and that didn't want to be jailed for performing abortions.
There were abortionists who paid the homicide squad to possibly refer, not only protect them, but bring clients, of whom there were plenty, because that's how it went then.
Hi, it's Gary Jubilant here. Do you want a real and raw look inside the world of crime? Well then check out my podcast, I Catch Killers, where I interview people from all sides of the law.
I draw my firearm and I went into fight mode. I wanted to find and confront this gunman.
I'm not getting verbal, am I?
I shouldn't have trusted you. See, I'm trying to open my mind up to defence barriers.
I know, it's just begging to be said.
Yeah, fair call. We have amazing guests every week. Search for I Catch Killers wherever you get your podcasts.
Now, something that I've never done much of, but you know a bit about it, the strange cases of people snatching babies. Now, there's been, in relatively recent times, there's one involving, would you believe, one of the big Calabrian families, funnily enough by chance.
Yeah, they picked the wrong baby, that's for sure.
Yeah, Barbaro, one of the Barbaros. Of all the people in all the world, they snatched a Barbaro baby. But anyway, tell us about the baby snatching story. You've got a long chapter here.
Yeah, there's quite a few cases. And look, there was in the 90s, there was some really big cases in the UK that really exposed deficiencies in, hospital security. But I did one even further back because I read about this case years ago and I just filed it away. It was actually a young woman, a waitress, snatched a baby from a hospital in Sydney in the 1940s because she just wanted a baby and she just rocked on in and after a dance and took this baby.
A psychological thing that affects some women.
Definitely, mostly women, and there is a theme with the big UK cases like Abby Humphries was one. I mean, it was massive. They're women who have experienced usually a loss, like a child loss or a pregnancy loss. Right. Then you've got probably mixed in there some mental ill health, a lot of stuff, or trying to keep a relationship is another theme. Right. They fake pregnancies to try and keep a relationship. But so there's a few of those. I went pretty wild with this chapter. I just found it interesting. I even touched on the Lindbergh kidnapping only because that was probably the most famous of
course,
that time.
One of the biggest crimes
ever. And, there's a lot of theories about what happened there, But I did find one locally because, I grew up in the Outer East and I live out that way. There was one in Lilydale in the 1970s.
Really?
1976.
And what, remind me.
Yeah, and actually it was probably a few months before I was born. I'm getting long in the tooth, I will say.
A few months after I started work, sadly.
Doing all that great reporting. Well, what happened was there's a family, they're living in Lilydale, which, the gateway to the Yarra Valley, an outer suburb. The couple have got 3 children. They've got their new 2-week-old baby who was born at probably either the William Angus Hospital or I think there was a Lilydale Bush Hospital back then.
Yeah, there was, I think. Yep.
And, back in the day, you'd have all the baby announcements in the paper and it's all, I think I had one in the Leader when I had my younger daughter.
Yeah.
But, just going about the day, it's like in the morning, midweek. The mum's got, the little kids and she's feeding the baby and there's a knock on the door and one of the children goes to answer it. They're under 10, these kids, and there's a woman at the door, wanting to speak to the mum and saying, "Oh, my name's Sue. I'm here to check the baby." And she actually entered the home.
Of course.
But it took a really dark turn here. So this woman threw pepper in the woman's face. Her name was Janine, who has the newborn baby and the two other kids, and held a butter knife to her back and forced her into the kitchen and basically tied her up with, the kind of sticking plaster you use for like sports injuries, lip plus, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it was completely horrendous. Slashed the telephone cord and basically grabbed the baby, ran to the carport. Absolutely terrifying. So she'd put the younger children in a bedroom. So this mother, I cannot imagine the terror. Like having had my own kids, just that absolute terror. Broke free and ran to the neighbours. The baby's gone. Called the police, called her husband. It's absolutely all systems go. And the police are pleading, going, this is a young baby. The baby is breastfed. It's in danger.
Yeah.
So the husband obviously spoke for the wife. There's a fair bit of press coverage about this. I think things were a bit looser back then, with like access to families, or just a bit more impromptu. It's not as polished as it was, but still seemed extremely effective. And they just pleaded, please bring our baby back. Interestingly, once police had started doing investigations, they found out from talking to the parents of the stolen baby that a woman had called the house and claimed to know the mum. Said, "Oh, my name's Sue. I know the mum from, the hospital." And the dad's like, "Well, we don't know anyone of that name." But it turns out the abductress, the woman who abducted the baby, had actually been calling people literally from, looking at the birth notices, just
so she was
kind of punting.
Well organised.
Punting, yeah.
So it's a sort of an irrational mad crime, and yet she'd gone about it very rationally.
This is the thing. It was completely,
fairly well planned, really.
I feel like it was, a bit rudimentary, but she, she threw the pepper in the face and did all that.
You went prepared.
She went prepared, and, there was a fair bit of planning going on in like calling and looking. And so a few days later, so the baby's missing, but a few days later they get a call. Now, I couldn't find out exactly who had made that call, but I think it's pretty safe to say it was the husband of the woman who had taken the baby, because this is where it gets a bit weirder than and horrifying than usual. You've got to maintain a facade of being pregnant, right?
Yes.
Like if you're then suddenly coming home with a baby.
Yeah.
So it turns out that the woman who'd taken the baby was from Tacoma up in the hills, a 36-year-old woman called Elsie Robeson. She already had 6 kids.
Oh.
And, pretty sure her husband was the one who called and said, okay, we've got this baby here. And she told him that she had given birth at the Angus and then, been discharged. So like within a day. But also the baby's 2 weeks old. And I thought, if you've got 6 kids, surely you can tell a bit if it's like a newborn.
You'd have some sense of it.
Yeah. But look, it seems...
Especially someone who's seen all those new ones.
Yeah, exactly.
Before.
The real freshies, It's so good that the family were reunited. But the story of why this woman did it is really interesting. It's believed that she was having a phantom pregnancy. Now, I had to do a bit of research. It's apparently a thing where, maybe you really want a baby so much, or you think you might be pregnant and, it's a psychological thing, but, you have a scan and you can't deny if there's not a little fetus in there, you can't, fake it. But the psychological thing is so strong, and it can actually mimic symptoms in your body of pregnancy, like your period stops or, other things. But going back to when I said about the baby being a couple of weeks old, it did go to court, and the police prosecutor did ask Elsie Robeson's husband about the fact that the baby his wife presented to him at home saying, oh, look, we've got a new child, was not a newborn. And he said, I could not tell the difference between a brand spanking new baby and one that was 2 weeks old. And I just noted that's a bit odd considering you've got 6 kids.
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought that was a bit strange, but she told him she'd gone into labour at the Angus Hospital that morning and was just discharged the same day.
Covering up the fact he hadn't immediately contacted.
No. Yeah. And I think, it must be a shock. Like, honestly, if your wife is stealing a baby, you're pretty unwell. And, She thought she was pregnant, but then she'd had tubal ligation 6 years before. It's kind of all a bit shady, but, you know, she really wanted another baby. So I think there was a bit of trauma that her husband had said, hey, we've got enough kids, like let's, sort it out. They'd explored fostering and adoption. They actually even had a foster baby who'd stayed with them for 6 months, but then they had to return that baby, and so that was traumatic. So you can sort of see how this...
Sort of loss, the ligation, the handing the other one back.
Yeah, it's all happening. But they, as I said, the detectives found out that she had been making phone calls to other parents pretending to have a legitimate reason to visit their homes, trying to say, oh, maybe I'm a visiting
nurse or whatever.
Baby nurse.
Baby
or
nurse,
I don't know what they called them back then, mothercraft nurses or something. Yeah. She didn't get jail time. Mostly these women need intensive psychological help. And
the system was actually, I think, pretty tolerant of women with problems. Infanticide was on the books. And any child that was killed by its mother under a certain age, under 12 months or something, it was written off as infanticide, not murder. Yep. And the penalties were much lower. It was sort of a recognised thing that sort of a de facto acknowledgement of
postpartum depression or psychosis, postpartum psychosis.
The law always recognised it.
Yeah.
In a way.
In some ways, I feel like courts were more woke back then, like a bit more understanding, or there was probably a groundswell at that time as well to have more understanding about mental health. I think from the institution days it was, but there
was discretion. Magistrates and judges had discretion, and I think they used it.
Yeah, well, she was committed to stand trial. She was released on bail. Her husband gave assurance, I'll keep an eye on her. He changed the way he worked so he could be at home, like probably had to travel a bit being in Upwey to like go to wherever he worked. He rearranged his hours. Yep. She pleaded guilty to abduction but not guilty to aggravated burglary. I thought the aggravated part of what she did was actually extremely serious. Let alone just taking a baby and tying. I mean, terrifying. Yeah. Absolutely terrifying. And she showed a lot of remorse, 4 years probation. But the judge did say, his name was Roland Leckie, and her use of force against the mother was appalling. It caused appalling distress. But then the newspapers followed up after the court case, and they had a photo of her, like, the woman who'd abducted the baby with her youngest child, was probably about 5 or 6, sort of, hugging her and said, I feel terrible. It was something that just built up. So the journos are like interviewing her going, what the hell happened? Yeah. She wanted to personally apologise, but she couldn't face her. And well, that's really all I could find after that. But I just found I was like, that's just scary. It's like one of those chilling suburban crimes.
Yeah. Totally.
Like completely wild. But, who knows what her mental health was like. Presumably she got some help.
A lot of crime, it's happening to the people next door. That's
the mushroom
right.
murders, I mean.
Exactly right.
The more I think about that, the more I hear, and I listened in a bit to the pre-sentencing stuff, it's actually so chilling. Like, the more I hear about what happened to those poor people and what Erin Patterson did, I find it terrifying. I cannot lie. Like, it's so scary.
It's a terrible crime. It's a terrible crime. With malice aforethought for months. It's not as if she sort of got out of bed one morning and said, I'm going to do this.
Going to cook a beef Wellington.
A florid episode of it. She planned it for a long time.
Yeah. And the ripple effect, like you think about the trauma, the terrifying nature of what happens. Your baby's abducted, you're tied up, you're like just in bits for 2 days. Listening to and hearing what some of the witness statements were in the Erin Patterson case, just the fallout for everyone. The children will have to see their mother in jail. Why? I just keep thinking, why would you do that? If you're a devoted mother, why?
Yes, there's something loose there.
Yeah.
Emily Webb, is it fair to say that anyone who wants your new book, Murder in the Suburbs, can get it from all good bookstores and all bad ones as well, and online?
Correct. It is in quite a few bookstores. I know it's in the bigger name ones, but you can also go into your little indie and request it to be ordered, and also your library. You can go and ask your library to order it.
Recommended retail price?
It's about 30.
That sounds right.
Yeah, different places.
Looks about $30.
Yeah, like different places do different
deals.
Prices.
They do. Em, thanks for telling us that one. Next week, you're going to come back again and talk to us, I think, about some poisoning cases.
I certainly am. I have a chapter in the book.
Poisoning with a twist.
Yes.
Thanks for listening. Life and Crimes is a Sunday Herald Sun production for True Crime Australia. Our producer is Jonty Burton. For my columns, features and more, go to heraldsun.com.au/Andrew Rule, one word. For advertising inquiries, go to newspodcastssold@news.com.au. That is all one word, newspodcastssold. And if you want further information about this episode, links are in the description.